Hello and welcome to the 18th episode of When Life Hands You Lemons. This episode features the amazing and inspiring Rachel Feigelson. Now, Rachel got her start back in the music industry when she did her degree in Boston and then did her final semester in Los Angeles and did an internship there. She solidified her career within the industry when she attended the Winston House, which is when artists come and perform for a group of industry professionals, we'll say. I don't want to give too much information because Rachel gives a very good explanation of what it is and who started it and all that fun information. So I don't want to screw up any of that information, so I'll let Rachel tell that story. But that is how she kind of solidified. She wants to go into entertainment law and is consulting with Taylor Dayne. And Taylor Dayne has just recently written a book, which comes out in February. And Rachel's actually mentioned in it. And for those of you who don't know who Taylor Dayne is, she is the 35th most successful female artist of all time, according to Billboard.com. So that's pretty amazing. And another thing that I found very, very inspiring was that Rachel got her start by working with some of the biggest names in the music industry and has continued to work with some of the biggest names in the industry. Now, most people kind of get in and they work from the bottom all the way up, and Rachel has done that, but Rachel has been very fortunate enough to work extraordinarily hard and have opportunities presented to her where she's able to work with large clients and on big projects. So I'm so excited for her to be on the show this week because she shares a lot of great information about artist management, sponsorships for brands, and how to find new micro-influencers and all kinds of different things, as well as how the music industry is changing. So we dive into that quite a bit, and I'm so excited for her to be on the show. But before I dive in and we start the show, I want to remind you to please sign up to my mailing list, as it's a great way to be notified for new episodes. The link for that will be in the show notes below. I would also encourage you to support me on Patreon, and there's some cool tiers there where you can work with me and I can do one-on-one sessions with you and provide you with some insight on how to navigate the music industry, as well as giving me a good rating in Apple Podcasts. A 5-star rating and or a review would be greatly appreciated, as it greatly helps me boost the show and have it be discovered by new listeners. Lastly, there is a guest request form in the show notes as well. So if you or somebody you know would be a good guest for the show, please fill that out and I will reach out to you so we can get something going and hopefully have you as a guest on the show. So without further ado, I don't want to take any more time. Let's dive into my conversation with the amazingly talented Rachel Feigelson. Cool. So why don't you just kind of start by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing, how you got into music and all that fun stuff.
Okay, well, my name is Rachel Feigelson. I'm 22 years old. I have my own music management and consulting company called Roxanne Management. It's kind of a long story about how I got into the industry. So ultimately, I want to be a music lawyer. And growing up, I loved singing and acting, but I never was very talented. I preferred the business side behind the industry. But at first, I thought I wanted to manage actors and actresses. And it was kind of, following like a weird series of events that were just coincidences that I ended up interning at a music management company. And from there, I fell in love with it and I decided that this is what I wanted to do. I had some great mentors who, we could discuss all of this in more detail in a little. But yeah, I had some really great mentors that paved the path for me. I'm going to law school next year, which will be exciting. But, I kind of took the leap and started my own company 7 months ago. And it's been really fun and an incredible journey. I've learned so much. So that's the little basis about me.
Cool. I didn't know that you were going to be going into law school. I even kind of thought about it myself. I've been like, I'm really interested in the business side, and kind of all that nerdy technical stuff kind of fascinates me. So I've always been like, I should consider going to law school. And I think I probably will later down the road. So what kind of like lawyer do you want to be, or what kind of law do you want to get into?
So I want to do music law, and I really want to, represent the artists. I find that there's so many issues with, artists and record labels, and having so many friends who are singers and being in the industry, there's such a need for it, right? You really need these strong lawyers to represent the artists, so this way, everything's fair on their end. And I find that a lot of the lawyers tend to work at the bigger labels and publishing companies, which is great. Those are great opportunities. But I feel like there's a little bit of a lack in the quality of lawyers who are representing some of the artists. And, it's very frustrating for the artist. If the artist doesn't have a strong lawyer, they can't be successful a lot of the time, because the lawyer is negotiating a lot of the deals on their behalf. They're making sure that everything's fair. You see so many times, some of the bigger companies taking advantage of smaller artists. So
Right. And I had a conversation with, his name is Elliot Jacobson. He's a touring and session drummer for Elle King and Ingrid Michaelson. He's also a producer and artist manager. But I had a conversation with him last week. Well, the episode will have come out, I think, the week before this one.
Okay.
But we had a conversation last week, and we were talking about how important it is for artists to learn kind of the business side of the industry, because a lot of artists these days are getting taken advantage of. They're kind of jumping into a music career and they're not really understanding kind of the beast that it really is. And a lot of labels and stuff, they're getting screwed over on record deals and all kinds of different things. And I think it's really unfortunate. So why don't you talk a little bit about how you've kind of experienced you've experienced an artist who's kind of been taken advantage of, or you see an artist who isn't as knowledgeable on a topic that they should be, because I think all artists should have some type of basic understanding of kind of music industry 101, do's and don'ts of copyright law, things like that. I think everybody should have a basic understanding. So give us your 2 cents on that. And what have you kind of experienced with that?
Yeah, so I consult for Taylor Dayne, and she's the reason why I started my company. For those who are not familiar with Taylor, she's the 35th most successful female artist of all time, according to Billboard. She sold 75 million records, toured with Michael Jackson, and she sang Tell It to My Heart and Love Will Lead You Back. And she was really big in the 80s. And so, when she signed her record deals, Spotify wasn't a thing, and she basically got herself into a situation where she's not receiving the performance rights of Tell It to My Heart any longer. And, that song was made before she was even signed to a label. And so just because of, some past decisions she's made, she's not receiving any of that money on Spotify. And that song has been streamed millions and millions of times. So you see things like that. And because of a 35-year copyright rule, in about 4 years, she's going to have the opportunity to, fight that and receive her performance rights again. But, that's something that's been very frustrating. She was really misguided about some of the decisions she made. A lot of the times you don't really know who's looking out for you, who is and who isn't in the music industry. And it's hard because, especially when you're a young artist, I find a lot of people are very trusting. And even on the business side of things, when I got into the industry, I was very trusting. And, you see somebody who seems knowledgeable and they seem to have the best interest in you, and you take their advice. And sometimes it's not good advice. And unfortunately, that's, what Taylor had done. And now there's consequences that she could have never expected years later because, again, things like Spotify and Apple Music were not a thing.
So the ever-changing music industry has been kind of a negative thing for Taylor in her, it sounds like in her case, that she's not receiving any of the royalties that she should absolutely be entitled to. And because copyright law can be very complex, and depending on the contract that she had maybe signed, she didn't get into that kind of fruitfulness of the contract or royalties, unfortunately. So I'm kind of excited to see how your path goes and how you're going to guide these artists and lead them into fruition on these types of things.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that as well. And you sometimes even see smaller artists at a label and they're sometimes like pushed aside, and they're receiving in advance, but they're not able to put out music because the label's not really focusing on them. And they're kind of locked into this thing, which, so there's those issues as well that I'm really excited to face. I haven't really worked with any smaller artists yet, but, that's something that I would love to do in the future. So.
Right. And I had an earlier episode that came up, I think last year, where I had talked to an entertainment lawyer, and she's been a lawyer for probably 12 years now, I think, practicing lawyer. She's been in the music industry for that long. And she was telling me some of the stories, some of the horror stories. She's like, she had a client that got this opportunity to sign with a major label. And she's like, this artist was just totally starstruck. They just had complete stars in their eyes. And I had told them numerous times, do not sign this contract. Do not sign this contract. And they ended up signing it. And it didn't turn out the way they had hoped it was going to be because they had such stars in their eyes. And it didn't end up like they wanted it to. And that was unfortunate. But that's just kind of how the cookie crumbles, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And she's negotiated all kinds of different contracts with all kinds of different people. And there's just been so many horror stories and how labels will take advantage of kind of smaller artists. And they'll say, hey, we'll give you X amount of dollars up front, but it's an exclusive contract. So you may be working in the studio for 3 to 4 years, but then come your contract and they're not releasing any music. They're actually just shelving you. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you've spent all this time that you could have been releasing all this really good music on other labels or even independently, but you signed this contract and you got this money that now has to be recouped, but they're not releasing your music. So it's like, how am I going to pay for this?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's kind of a dangerous slope to get into. And it's sad that it's still being taken advantage of. But at the same time, it's like, that's just how it is, unfortunately.
Yeah. That's very true.
How did you know that you were going to be going into artist management? Did you kind of knew that you wanted to be managing talent, correct?
Yeah, so I can give you the full story in detail
absolutely.
If you want to hear. So basically my sophomore year of college, I loved the TV show The Impractical Jokers. And they're a comedy troupe for those who don't know, and they have a TV show. And I wanted to, work or intern at their talent agency. And so I found their manager and I sent them an email, and it was called Vector Management, the company. And at the time, they didn't have much information about Vector online. They just had the 3 locations. I went in for the interview and realized it was a music management company, and the Impractical Jokers were one of their only non-musical entities. And so they had represented Kings of Leon and Kesha, and this is when Kesha was going through the whole, lawsuit thing. And I interned there and I absolutely loved it. It was incredible. And then from there, I had a lot of access to different managers and different emails. And I was in a sorority at my college. I went to Boston University, and we were looking for a performer to perform at one of our events. So I had the email of Drew Chadwick, or I thought it was Drew Chadwick's manager. He was in the band Emblem 3, which was a big band several years ago. They toured with Selena Gomez, and they were signed to Simon Cowell's record label. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to send his manager an email and see how much he would cost. I sent an email to the email, and I got a response back. And it was actually Drew's personal email, not the manager's email. And Drew was like, hey, can we FaceTime? I want to show you some new music. So I was like, okay, this is cool. And so I FaceTime with Drew, and his music was incredible. And I was like, I need to get you a manager. I need to connect you to someone. And so from there, I started working with Drew a little bit. And my dad happened to be talking to his friends saying, that I was helping out this guy, Drew. And my dad's friend was like, my son has some friends who are in the music industry, maybe they can give Rachel some advice. So I was connected to Matt Graham. Matt Graham started SB projects with Scooter Braun. He was Cody Simpson's manager for a while. He now manages Midland, Jasmine Thompson, Corey Harper, and he broke away from SB Projects to start brand management. So Matt became one of my mentors, and Boston University has a program where you could study in Los Angeles for your last semester of college. So I decided to do that. So last January, I moved to LA and I interned for Matt, and I shadowed him and Jack Minahan, who were the two partners of brand management. Jack represents Nicky Romero, and he discovered Mike Posner. And so it was really cool to be able to learn from these guys. And then, what really sold me on the music industry is, I don't know if you're familiar with Winston House, but Winston House is a house in Venice Beach, owned by Corey McGuire, and he invites friends and music industry, execs and singers to his house every Thursday, and has a new and upcoming artist or a really famous artist perform. So, and it's 150 people, so it's very small, invite only. And Matt Graham, who was my mentor, was really involved with it. But, so I've seen, Kelly Clarkson there and Hunter Hayes. And so the first show I went to, Youngblood and Mike Posner performed. And this was in February of last year. I saw them perform, and the way they moved the audience was incredible. And at that moment, I was like, I knew I wanted to be in the music industry, but I'm like, I will do anything it takes to be successful in this industry because I see how an artist can touch someone. So I learned everything I could at brand management. I would go home and then would be out networking all night, every night. I would try working every weekend. I did everything I could. And then upon graduating from college, I had a friend who is an influencer amongst, younger kids, and she's an anti-bullying advocate, and she was doing this project, and Taylor Dayne was involved. And so, I went there and I met Taylor. I was telling Taylor about my experience, and at this point, I was applying for jobs at talent agencies, and I was waiting to hear back. And so, Taylor, I started working with Taylor as I was waiting to hear back, and then Taylor was like, I really want to give you this opportunity. I think you need to kind of start your own thing. And it was a hard decision because, obviously there was a safety of working at a talent agency, or I could work with her. I couldn't have done both because a talent agency is very time consuming, first of all. And secondly, you're signing a contract with them, and, there can be a conflict of interest. So I ended up taking a job outside of the music industry initially to work with Taylor, as I was kind of building up a clientele. And then, I worked at this nonprofit for 2 months, and they had an event called Creative Community for Peace, where they were honoring Scooter Braun and Eitan Ben-Horian and Neil Jacobson, who are incredible, incredibly successful guys in the music industry. And at that event, I saw a lot of the people I knew from the music industry, and Taylor, kind of said to me, look, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you need to quit your job here and you need to focus on your company full time. And that's exactly what I did. And yeah, and here I am right now. It's been going really well so far, and I'm excited to continue growing.
Wow. My jaw's kind of on the floor right now because you're taking a very similar path that I would like to take, or you've kind of networked your way into the industry. And I've stressed that many times before on this podcast and with the guests, and how important networking is with all of the different people that you're meeting within the industry. In fact, you have to have a network in order to succeed in the music industry. It's not as simple as applying, to a job on LinkedIn or Indeed or, wherever it's kind of who you know. And so I'm excited to hear about all of your success. So congratulations on that.
Thank
first
you.
of all. It's very inspiring because I too want to get into artist management. I'm working with a couple artists currently, but I really want to get into artist management, either starting with a talent agency and kind of learning a lot like you did, and then branching off, or even sticking with and working my way up. But there's so much to learn out in the industry. And what are some of the things that you had learned at those internships, or kind of freelancing and whatnot in school, and then kind of taking it on, what have you learned that has been super helpful for you?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is that you're always going to continue learning. Never act like you know everything. You have to be eager to learn. Like, I'm still learning. And one of the reasons why I work with primarily people who have a following, who have a brand, who are successful is because they've had success. I can learn from them, right? So I think that's a really important thing. Secondly, as you were talking about networking, I feel like a lot of people network, but they don't do it correctly necessarily. It's important to have pure intentions in the music industry. You're doing it because you love the music. You're doing it because you want that person's music to get out there. You see so many people who sometimes get so focused on the money, and the money is a result of having a passion and having that like purity. If I could help somebody in any way, of course I'm going to help them, and that's definitely stood out to a lot of people. And that's a lot of how I've made some really great connections, So I think another thing that has been really important to me is kind of looking at the constants in the music industry. We spoke earlier how the music industry is always changing. And so it's important to look at a client and say, okay, well, what has stayed the same throughout the past years and what will, continue to stay the same in the next 10 years. And so in Taylor's case, she was big in the 80s, and what's the same is nostalgia. People love the 80s still, right? People love Tell It to My Heart. 10 years ago, they loved it, and 10 years from now, they're going to like it. So one of the things that we played up is, it was her 30-year anniversary of Tell It to My Heart. So we got some of her, her friends and some influencers like Kris Jenner and, RuPaul and Jonathan Cheban and all these different people to sing Tell It to My Heart. And I had a videographer put it together, which was a really cool project that I had a lot of fun, brainstorming and executing. But so I'd say that's a really big part of it. I think it's, also remembering your goals. Like, that's very important to me, and knowing that there's somebody who's going to work the extra mile if you're not doing it. So actually, Taylor is coming out with a book on February 14th. And she didn't tell me this, but I got the advanced copy of the book, and she wrote a few pages on me, and which was incredible. And so I actually took some of the pages and I put them in a frame by my bed. So now when I wake up every morning, I read exactly what it is that she told me and her advice that she gave to me and why I'm in this industry. So I think those are some of like the big things.
Yeah, I mean, if that's not motivation and inspiration for you, I'm not sure what would be. To have somebody as successful and kind-hearted as Taylor write something in stone and in a personal book, and that's to say that you've made that big of an impact is pretty amazing. So again, congrats on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And it sounds like you absolutely deserve that as well, because it's just like I'm still like blown away at how hard you've been working and all this stuff, and everything is kind of coming in fruition. And it's even inspiring to me because it's like, I got to keep working, keep my head up. I'm maybe in a limbo status right now, but things are going to start looking up. So when you worked on the lip sync video, tell us a little bit about that project, or without, of course, violating any contracts, of course, but
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about how, like, the reach out, how the marketing, and what it's like to kind of put a project like that together and then actually execute it. I can't imagine, like, when you're working with celebrities whose schedules are so busy all the time that if they say they only have an hour, they probably only have an hour. So what's it like working on a project like that and then, executing it? Were there any flaws that you ran into, and how did you kind of work through those?
Yeah, so I think the reason I came up with the idea for the video is because we wanted to, expand Taylor's fan demographic, because you have a demographic who are in their 40s and 50s who know who Taylor is and know her songs, and then a younger demographic who knows her songs but might not recognize her name. And so, I thought this would be a great way to bring, all different demographics to one place and know who Taylor is. So I came up with this idea and I just acted on it immediately. I said, Taylor, give me your phone. And she's like, what? And I went through every one of her contacts and, was like, okay, and wrote a list of everyone. And then I went through my own personal contacts and through friends and reached out to people by finding their emails and just had this whole list of maybe it was 100 people that I thought I could reach out to. And it was very similar. I'm a very big Tim Ferriss fan, and I know Tim Ferriss inspired me in that way, where when he wrote Tools of Titans, he just sent emails to a bunch of people, and a lot of people got back, some didn't. And so I sent everyone a really warm email, and that's another thing Taylor always taught me, is that I'm so used to being very businessy and very direct, because that's what you're taught in college, and in this industry you have to be warm. And you have to be very personable and friendly. So, I sent very personal emails to all these people, and some got back, some didn't. Some said they were going to send videos, some didn't. But it was a major win when Kris Jenner sent her video in, when RuPaul sent his video in. I was there with Jonathan Chibon when we recorded his video. And then you have Debbie Gibson, Eliza Schlesinger, all these different amazing people from all walks of life coming together to do this. So that was cool, receiving those videos. From there, finding a video editor to edit it was really challenging, especially because, so we at first, gave the project to a friend and he did an incredible job at it. But then, Taylor was like, well, I also want this person to do it and this person. And so, it's sometimes hard when you have so many versions of the same video and to choose one and not choose the others and stuff like that. We posted it in August, and I would say, and then from there, we gave it to an outside PR company to do the publicity for it. Unfortunately, the video didn't take off as we had hoped it would have, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that. And so about 2 weeks ago, I actually changed the title of the video, which got it a lot more views. But it was a very cool project to do, and it's out there. I would have liked to see it get more views, but it's still a learning experience. It was incredible to be able to do this project, and you learn from it.
Right. That's really cool. I think I watched it when you had first submitted your form to be a guest on the show. I think I watched it, but I'd have to go back and refresh my memory to see what it was. And when I find it, I'll definitely put it in the show notes as well, so all the listeners can check it out as well. So that was really cool. That's kind of an exciting project, especially when you're getting, emails and videos from Kris Jenner and RuPaul and all them, because I watched RuPaul a couple times, and it's really, really cool to see that. You said that in college, they teach you to be very direct, very business, and Taylor taught you how to be more personable, kind of warm, as you had said. Yeah. So what would your perfect email look like to reach out to somebody?
Well, it depends. It's for different things, I guess, because I'm working on a lot of brand partnerships for Taylor. So without saying exactly who I'm talking about, I can find right now an initial email I sent to a company. So there's one company. I think it's also important to when you're really for brand partnerships, be obviously working with brands that you love as well as your client. But I'll read you an email that I sent to somebody. I said, hi, blank. I love their products or their place, and they're almost every day. Similarly, my client Taylor Dayne is a big fan. Taylor is ranked as the 35th most successful female artist of all time, according to Billboard. Article can be found here, having sold over 75 million records. Taylor and I would love to discuss the possibility of a brand partnership with blank. We'd like to do something similar to blah, 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 blah. Taylor is 55 years old, but has the body of a 25-year-old. Taylor and celebrity hormone specialist Dr. Eva Quinar created a bone broth recipe that Taylor has every morning. Taylor attributes her figure to this recipe. We'd love for this recipe to be temporarily added to blah, blah, blah. Is blah, blah, blah interested in discussing this opportunity? Best, Rachel Feigelson. And like that wasn't super warm, but, you know, it was definitely more warm than just, you know, being like, hi, like, let's discuss this brand partnership, this and this. But, you know, even with, I'm working with a band called Big Ol' Nasty Get Down, which is a collaborative project between many different bands. You know, you have Chad Smith, who's a part of it, from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Remy Jaffe, all these really cool people. And, you know, they also taught me, you know, when I'm sending a text message to someone, or if I'm reaching out to one of the band members, you know, I try to add emojis and I try to like say something funny or whatever it is. You know, like sometimes Taylor, when she hit up a piano player and she goes like, hey, like Magic Man, you know, I think actually maybe the piano player's name was Mike. She's like, hey, Magic Mike, like, what's up? And it's just funny things like that, I mean, you know, there's a time and place for them. I'm not saying that you should always be like that, but it's important to kind of have that warmth. And that's something that I definitely learn. And I actually do a lot of networking through Instagram, through Instagram DM. So
what would be kind of your platform of choice for networking? You said you do a lot through Instagram, but is that kind of like your go-to, or do you have other things that you go to for networking?
Yeah, so I really like Instagram, just because it's so easy. People could see who you are easily. I use Raya Work, which Raya is they have like the dating part of it and they have the work part of it. And it's a really great app for creatives in the entertainment industry and people of all walks of life. I've met some really great people there. But yeah, Instagram has been super helpful for me because you have access to so many people, and a lot of people don't understand that you could literally DM someone and a lot of the times they see it. Like I've DM'd people, and I haven't really done this recently, but when I was first starting out, you know, I would just DM people and a lot of the times they would answer. And like that's what happened with Drew. You know, with Drew, I just sent him an email what I thought it was his manager, and that, you know, that led the path to a lot of other things. And also similarly, Drew has a song out with Tank God. Tank God produced Rockstar by Post Malone, and I just DM'd Tank God on Instagram, you know, with that. So it's a really good tool, and a lot of people overlook it. And it was funny because the assistant at brand management would always call me like the DM queen.
It sounds like I mean, even me, I overcomplicate networking, but it really doesn't have to be that complex. It can be something as simple as sending a DM on Instagram, like you had said, like, hey, I really liked this song, or I really liked what you did in this article, or I really liked what you did in this song, or I really liked what you said on this TV show, or whatever. I would love to connect with you. You know, it could be something as simple as that. And it's just waiting for the response and building a relationship there.
I'll give another example too, quickly. I was with, so one of my friends, she's a very talented singer. Her name's Shay Brock. She has a song out with Gucci Mane. And we were at Erewhon the other day, which is a healthy like grocery store in LA. It's like a Whole Foods on steroids. And we saw, there's this guy who's always at Erewhon, and he was with this other health influencer. And Shay and I just walk up to this guy and we're like, oh, hi, it's the king of Erewhon. You know, and we ended up sitting and eating with them and learning so much, and we made new friends. And it's, some people are so scared to do things like that, but like we were fun, you know? So
yeah, don't be afraid to kind of put yourself
exactly.
outside and take that leap of faith to make that connection.
Exactly.
I think you put in I'd have to reread your submission, but you put in there that you were going into artist management, and then you also said something about music management, or maybe I just thought the terms were kind of interconnected a little bit. But it sounds like you've done a little bit of both. Can you explain what the difference between music management is and what artist management is?
So a lot of what I'm really doing right now is consulting. You know, I and I consult on a lot of different things for different people. You know, a lot of what I'm doing with Taylor now too is about new music. You know, because she's not signed to a label currently, and so it's about getting her in sessions and, you know, figuring out which song would be best to put out. It's also about, okay, how are we going to distribute the music? Is it going to be through STEM, AWOL, TuneCore? What is the marketing plan? You know, I help out with a lot of the social media aspects of things. I'm helping out on brand partnership things. So I think, I mean, I use artist and music manager interchangeably, but, you know, right now I am doing more consulting than managing, even though I'm doing what a manager would do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So you're doing a lot of you're doing kind of everything, correct? With working with Taylor, like publicity, you're crafting press releases, you're working on brand or sponsorships, you're kind of doing everything.
Yeah, and she has a publicist. So a lot of the times too, like I'll be in contact with her and say, hey, like, let's try to get Taylor here. Or, you know, what do you think of this? Or, hey, like, I wrote this, you know, press release for this. Like, can we push it out to these people? And I kind of feel that, so Taylor has a manager, right? And he's not solely a music manager, so he doesn't do as much as on the music side of things, which is where, you know, I came in. And yeah, like I kind of feel like in a sense, you're kind of like the CEO of a company, because I'm, you know, talking to her publicist and, you know, her lawyers and, you know, the people who are dealing with her pub rights and her business manager and all these different people.
Okay. So have you worked with a lot of smaller clients before, or is Taylor kind of your main one?
So I worked with Taylor. I've worked with Drew Chadwick, who is a part of Emblem 3. I'm working with the Big Ol' Nasty Get Down. I've worked with Nicky Romero, who's the DJ. I did marketing for his Northeast tour, which was a lot of fun.
I'm a big fan of Nicky.
Nicky's amazing. He is one of and Nicky's manager. So he's two managers, but Jack Minahan in particular is incredible. He's taught me so much. He's like the best mentor. And so it's really cool to see exactly like how he does everything with Nicky. And so I was really honored, you know, when he asked me to help with the marketing for Nicky's Northeast tour.
What was it like kind of taking on, because you've worked with smaller artists, but it sounds like you've kind of haven't worked with like real small artists kind of beginning.
I really haven't, which is...
It's kind of crazy because a lot of people have to start, you know, with the smaller artists. They don't kind of work as hard and get in like you do, and are able to work so incredibly hard and just kind of having all these opportunities come in. So how have you kind of managed that? Like, what was it like kind of just being thrown in? Like, I can imagine, like, for me, if I was thrown a massive client like Taylor Dayne, I wouldn't really know what to do. I'd be like, I'm honored, but what am I supposed to be doing? Versus a smaller artist, it's kind of the opposite for you. You become like, well, I know what to do for the smaller artist, but the approach has to be a little bit different, because you have to kind of build up connections for that smaller artist. So what was it like kind of jumping in like that? Were you kind of prepared for all of that to kind of happen?
Well, I think it's honestly easier to work with a bigger artist than it is a smaller artist. I think when you're working with... So every artist I've worked with is either... had some sort of fame, right? And so they've had success, and I'm learning from them as they're also learning from me. And I think when you're working with a newer artist, you know, you're really developing them as a whole. Because a lot of the times they don't necessarily know who they are. They don't know their branding. And when you're working with a bigger artist, a lot of that's already there. And you're just trying to take their image and connect that with their fans in a better way when you're talking about branding. And, you know, it's a lot easier when I'm trying to get brand partnership deals for Taylor because people know who Taylor is. And a new artist, they don't necessarily have that ability to be able to get those brand partnership deals. It was actually funny. I was So there's a great new band coming out. They're called Pink Roses. And they're releasing their first song on Valentine's Day. And I was just hanging out with one of the members of the band, and he was showing me the new music, and we actually just had this conversation. He was asking me what should I do, because we're new artists and this and that. And I'm like, that's so much harder to do, I personally think, than working with somebody bigger. But that's just my opinion on that.
I would agree that you made a good point there, because it's working with the bigger artists. Everybody knows who they are, and some people are kind of waiting for somebody like Taylor to reach out and be like, hey, I'd love to work with you. That kind of doesn't happen. So when it does happen, it's kind of like, oh, I already know, like, I would love to work, and everything just kind of falls into place. Like, they're making things work. They're putting you in connection with, oh, you need to speak with this person. They'll take care of this. This person will take care of that. And what do you need from us, and vice versa. So when you're working with all of these people, and you kind of have to put that aside and start kind of thinking like you were in that room with the singer or the member of that band, what advice would you give to somebody like that? Like, what can you do to kind of get them to Taylor Dayne's level of fame or Nicky Romero's level of fame?
So I think the big thing too is you have to differentiate yourself in some way. You have to do something so crazy and out there to get people's attention. I'm a really big fan of Youngblood. He signed to Interscope, and he released his EP in January of last year. And I saw him at Winston House, and I mentioned him earlier. When I found Youngblood, he had maybe 5,000 followers on Instagram. And now he has like 300,000 followers, and I've never seen such devoted fans. But even when he was at 50,000 followers, his engagement was insane. Because he was posting all these things that were so on brand and in Target, and just very, he's very rebellious. He had that brand, and he did this thing where people were getting heart tattoos because of him, which is something that's so outrageously there. It's a lot of that. It's really about thinking outside the box. How am I going to be different? What defines me, and showing that to people. I think Instagram's a very good tool for that, but it's not everything. It's also about the music. When you're first starting off, everything is about the music, and then also, if you're an artist, going to as many events as you can go to, meeting other artists, getting in sessions, and really perfecting your skill. I also think, though, a lot of the new and upcoming artists, or people who want to be artists, it's best to start out as a writer, because you're getting your foot in the door that way. So, if there was somebody, somebody newer who, I was planning to take on, I would have first just put them in a lot of sessions and really have them perfect their writing skills and their singing skills, and get them some cuts with some bigger artists. And then from there, really help them grow.
I would agree. I personally think that a lot of people can learn from bigger artists and people who have a lot of experience within the industry. They've kind of been through it all. They've seen failures, they've seen successes, they've experienced everything. So I think a smaller artist kind of working in a collaboration, even with a bigger artist, can really benefit them and can really kind of change their career in a good way or even a bad way. Depending on how they take the opportunity and run with it. So when you're talking about that, it kind of inspired me. Like, let's say there's a smaller artist, they're getting kind of bigger. They're like Youngblood, where let's say they have 5,000 followers on Instagram. They're kind of at that breaking point. Like, they can fill out a local venue of a couple hundred people, or they have really good engagement on social media, and they're kind of making a living already on that. But they want to take their career to the next step and start looking for a manager to kind of take on the business side of things and marketing, so they can focus on the creative endeavors of writing the music and producing and all that stuff. What are some of the things that an artist should look for in a manager when they're kind of at that point?
The first thing is somebody who understands you. a lot of the times if you're working with somebody who has very different or a different view of what you should be than your view of what you should be, it's not going to work out. You have to trust your manager. Also, seeing how successful they are in their track record. Unfortunately, some managers are in it for the money instead of the passion. And so they'll lead their artist astray because maybe they're doing a deal that's going to get them more money, but it's not good for the artist. For example, they might push them to get into a bad record deal because, the manager is getting 20% of that. And they don't have to, the manager is not the one who has to pay back the advance. It's the artist. Mm-hmm. So really looking at their track record, doing research on them, talking to people in the industry who know them, making sure you connect with them and you click with them. A lot of the times too, if you're a newer artist and a manager wants to work with you and believes in you, they will front the costs for things. That's something that I truly believe. And a reason, I haven't taken on any new artists is because when I do take on an artist I believe in, I'm investing my own money into that artist. So I think that's something that's very important, because if somebody truly believes in you, then they're going to put financial risk into it as well.
Right. And I've spoken with a couple other artist managers, and they say very similar things on you have to find somebody that is going to believe in you. You have to find somebody that's willing to not take on deals and opportunities that are going to benefit the manager, because it's not the manager's career, it's your career as an artist. And that's very important. A lot of artists think that the manager, regardless, that, they're doing everything they can to make my career successful. Well, yeah, but they might be putting their career first. Mm-hmm. And that can be kind of dangerous for an artist. It can very easily end their career. So when you say that, what are some of the good things, like green flags for a manager, and what are some of the instantaneous red flags? Let's say an artist, I go to a manager, I'm a musician, I go to a potential manager and I just say have coffee with them and they're saying certain things or they've done certain things. What are some green flags and what are some red flags to kind of keep an eye open?
So I'll talk about some of the red flags first. If a manager wants to be your best friend upon meeting you, that's probably not a good sign, and I see that a lot. First is the management relationship, and then is the friendship. You spend a lot of time with your clients, so yeah, you do develop friendships. And for example, Taylor I consider like an aunt to me at this point. But when I first met Taylor, it was not like that. So a lot of the times too, I see these singers, the first meeting, they're like, the person who wants to manage them is getting drunk with them, and it's a little weird. So I would say that's a red flag, and that happens more often than you think. I think too, sometimes people talk things up way too much and there isn't any proof. A lot of the times people name drop this and that, and there isn't anything substantial. So it's really about also looking into that. Some green flags are, you want the manager's asking you a lot of questions about yourself, your careers, and they're really listening. They don't sit there and start telling you, you do this, 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 and this. They're really trying to get to understand you. Another green flag is that they did their research. That they're coming to that meeting having, looked at all your social media accounts and knowing exactly, what you post and your engagement levels and the songs you put out, and having kind of having an idea, because some people don't show up prepared to those things. I think another green flag too is that, they're willing to pay for things. If I had a friend who once, went for a meeting with a potential manager, and the manager didn't pay for their coffee or pay for their lunch or something like that. To me, that's a red flag. The manager should be trying to also do what they can to, make that client feel comfortable, taking care of that client. So those are some of the things that I would say.
That's really good information, because like the red flags are like getting drunk with you in the first place and like wanting to be your best friend. Like a lot of people would take those as green flags. Like, hey, I'm getting cool with this person. But in actuality, that may not be a good thing. Just because like they may not be taking it as seriously as they should, because at the end of the day, the manager is basically the business manager. You are the business, and the manager is going to be managing everything. They're kind of the red light, green light person on anybody that goes through, anybody that wants to do a sponsorship, anybody that wants to do a collaboration. It's going through the manager first. So
I have another red flag that I actually just thought about too. If a manager shows up in like decked out in Gucci and all this designer things and is just spending their money frivolously, that's a big red flag, because they're going to do the same thing with your money and your career. I know I was told that by one of my mentors, because, you know, people who are truly successful, a lot of the times are not flaunting it. So that's something to keep in mind.
that's a very good point. And I just saw a picture on LinkedIn earlier today or yesterday of Bill Gates, and one of the most wealthiest people of all time, and he owns or is running the most successful and the largest charity in the history of humanity. And he was standing in line to get a burger at a restaurant. You know, it's staying humble and not, yeah, Bill Gates could probably buy that restaurant right then and there and have anything he wanted, but he took to himself and was very humble and stood in line like everybody else. And I think that really speaks volumes, is when people are very successful, whether it's, you know, influentially or even financially. I think being humble really says a lot about you and your personality. And you made a really good point of somebody who shows up in Gucci and Versace and then all kinds of like these big Chanel bags or whatever that they may be wearing. That's kind of a red flag, because like I'm going to
Like in moderation, it's great, you know,
Right.
if that's what you like and if you're doing it, whatever. But, you know, when somebody overdoes it, they're doing it a lot of the times to like give off an image of, oh, I have a lot of money, and they don't have money.
Right. It's just kind of like, oh, I saved up for 10 years for this and I bought it. This is kind of my splurge for the thing, you know? Like I've seen that happen many times where like I've went to kind of wealthier spots just so I can see, and then these people are even just in places right next door to me to get a coffee, and somebody rolls up in a Rolls Royce and they're wearing Gucci slides, and it just kind of like turns me off. It's like, are you like for real? Like, yeah, are you flaunting your money, or is this kind of like are you renting the car, or what's with the outfit, you know, type thing?
They don't have some people do have money in the bank, but a lot of people don't have the money in the bank.
Right. And you don't want your manager to rely on you to put that money in and funnel that bad habit, I should say.
Yeah.
Kind of coming back a little bit. What about managers who say, for example, I know this is a possibility, but I'm not sure how often this happens or what you think about it. What about, let's say you are managing Taylor. Let's say an artist that is completely in a completely different genre. Let's say like heavy metal or something is wanting you to manage them. How would that work? Or is that something you really want to look into, is having managers work with artists who are in similar genres? Or is it okay for them to kind of take on artists and bands in different genres?
Oh, I mean, I think it's all about, you know, what kind of music you like. Like, I think it's totally fine to take on people of different genres. Matt Graham, he works with Jasmine Thompson, and Corey Harper, he also works with Midland, which is a country trio. And I think it's good to have that diversify, but it has to be, you know, types of music you like. Like, I'm very into, there's this like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like this alt rock pop movement that's coming up, and it's, you know, Yoshi Flower and Young Blood and Harry Hudson, and Mike Posner had a song called Song About You, which is like that vibe too. And I love, and Chase Atlantic, like I love that kind of music, and I would love to take on a client like that at a point. But at the same time, like I don't listen to heavy metal. I'm not going to take on somebody who's heavy metal, because I don't know how to market them, you know? And if I don't love it, if I don't love working with them, it's not fair to either of us. But I think it's definitely good to diversify, because also you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, that's a good point. But at the same time, you like you said, you have all those other managers that take that on, and they're like, "Hey, I would love to work with you," and they also have a passion for the music. That's a good thing. But at the same time, let's say for example, I'm not a big fan of country music. However, I could probably figure out and market a country music artist. But it's a matter of who you know in that industry, correct? Like, do you know bloggers? Do you know people who will sponsor you? Can you reach out to brand partnerships? Do you know which brands to reach out to? Things like that.
Well, that's the whole thing. If you're not listening to country music and you take on a country act, you're not going to know what to do. Yeah, you could figure it out, but it's going to be harder. But for me, it's, again, like I follow Youngblood on Instagram. I follow Harry Hudson on Instagram. I see exactly how they're marketing and what works and what doesn't work. And I use that as, templates to look at other clients and say, okay, well, this was successful here. Could this similar concept be successful in other places? And I know exactly, with Taylor, we're really trying to get her into the whole health and fitness world right now, because Taylor is 55. She's the body of a 25-year-old. She's so much energy. Everyone's always asking about that. And so I follow a lot of health influencers on Instagram of her size, and I kind of see, okay, what are they doing? But I have a very strong interest in health and wellness, so I know exactly then what blogs to reach out to, what partnerships, would align with her and things like that. Whereas, let's say Taylor, was trying to market, or Taylor, was trying to brand herself as this person who loves cars. Like I wouldn't know where to start with that.
Right. So when you're doing this research and you're following these health and beauty bloggers and things like that, health and fitness bloggers, what are some of the trends that you're seeing that are kind of taking shape, whether there's something you've seen consistently over the last couple of months or even years, versus what are some things that you're seeing change, whether it be in marketing or social media, or what are some of those things that you're seeing changing or remaining consistent?
So there's a lot of more micro influencers now, because there's so many people who have, millions of followers, but, there's Instagrams now that are really tailored to specific types of diets and things like that. I find, so a lot of the people, I personally try to keep a very healthy lifestyle. I eat mostly paleo, and so I follow these people because it interests me, and I see, again, the brand partnerships that they're doing, and a lot of these people also form these groups, or like, I guess, engagement pods. I know that's like a term for Instagram, but it's also something that's not an Instagram, where they'll hang out and all support each other. And I find that to be very cool. And I also find that's very similar out in the music industry too, where you kind of have these like group of people who are always hanging out together and who are shouting each other out. That's the whole thing with like, Jaden Smith and his Misfit team, because like Harry Hudson's a part of that, and Jaden, and I believe his name is Tio. But yeah, I don't know. I personally also really got into health and wellness about a year ago, so I can't really talk about the long-term changes, but
Yeah, that definitely, yeah, that makes sense. So when, like, in my experience, like the health and like kind of mommy blogger, everybody's kind of starting that, and it's kind of becoming a saturated market. Just like, in my opinion, electronic music is becoming saturated. It's because it's so easy to get a computer and find a software where you can make music, and everybody thinks that they're an electronic music producer or even music producer, when in reality that's not really true. So how are these, when you're looking for different people to reach out to, different Instagram channels, different LinkedIn profiles or blogs or whatever, how are you picking the ones that really stand out versus the ones that are just kind of average, especially like when you're talking about micro influencers?
yeah, so there's a lot of information out there in this world, and I think content is king. Content is so important. So a lot of the things too is like in the health and wellness industry, you'll have a lot of people who are still blogging about, oh, like you have to have balanced meals, and with your bread and dairy and, you know, meat and all this other things. And like the keto diet, for example, that's like a smaller, newer type of thing, and it's growing. But those blogs, a lot of them are actually based in LA too, are people who are really up to trends with, you know, the latest things. Like, especially, you know, California, like we have Erewhon, we have Bulletproof Labs, we have all these like really cool cutting edge technologies where when I'm from Long Island, New York, and when I go home, you know, their version of eating like healthy, a lot of people is like, oh, I'm going to have low-fat yogurt, right? And like in California, a lot of the health bloggers I follow are like, no, you should not be having dairy. So I like looking for people who are one step ahead, I guess, of everyone else. And a lot of the times too, like I found a lot of the influencers through, you know, things I love, or through Target, you know, brand partners. So like Bulletproof, for example, I actually found out about Bulletproof. You know, I was very involved with I love Tim Ferriss, as I mentioned before, and he talks about keto diet, and I found out about Bulletproof through that. And I'm not keto. I've done the keto thing, but, you know, I started posting some like Bulletproof things, and Bulletproof reached out to me, and they started, you know, I was a Bulletproof like influencer for a short period of time. And then the other influencers they reached out to, I had access to them, and I was able to look at what they were posting. And then I would see, okay, well, who are some of their friends who are also doing this? And I just have a hunger for knowledge. So yeah.
I think that's a good mindset to be in, as well, is always be hungry. And like you said earlier in the episode, you said you always have to be learning. And I think that's not only just in the music industry, but also learning everything around you. Like, what are some of the things you're doing in your personal life that you may be able to tie into your music career or your artist career? Or what are some things you can connect the dots? You might be on the cutting edge of something.
Yeah, it is really cool. You know, you really have to take your interests and your clients' interests and see what you can do. And that's what makes it fun too, right? If you're doing something you're passionate about and working with companies you're passionate about, then it's a lot easier.
Right. I live by the motto is if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And I think
100%.
100%. And I completely agree. Because there's been jobs where I've had where I'm just like, I don't even feel like I'm working. I just really enjoy doing this. So I think that's kind of a good spot to end it here. What are some kind of foregoing tips and tricks that you have for anybody, that maybe like the top 3 tips that you have for somebody looking to get into artist management?
Number 1 is read a lot. Read every article you can. Read the news, you know, read Billboard, read business books. Again, I love Tim Ferriss. He's a top one for me. You know, read philosophy books. I'm really into Stoicism. You know, so I'd say that's a big thing. Number 2 is network with like-minded people, right? So the way that actually you and I got connected is through an artist manager's Facebook group. And so it's about kind of being a part of those groups and reaching out to people and looking for those opportunities. And, you know, if you see an event, go to the event, and don't be shy or scared to walk up to somebody, because I've been at so many events where, you know, an artist I really like is there, or like a really big manager, a really big person in the entertainment industry is there. And it's cool to have that opportunity. I mean, you know, and some people you don't have that opportunity based on location, but if you do have that, you know, make that an effort. You could also always email people. Like I was in Boston at Boston University when I reached out to Drew. And then I guess the third thing I would say is, you know, hold yourself accountable and always have an open mindset. Like, you are in control of your life for the most part. Yes, certain things are out of your control, but a lot of your success level is up to you. You make decisions every single day, and that could add to your success or can take away from your success. So, you know, make smart choices and really put in the effort. You know, no one else is going to do it it's up to you. So I think those are the 3 things. And then on an ending note, Taylor's book is coming out on February 14th. It's called Tell It to My Heart. And yeah, I would love if you guys got it, if you wanted to learn more about Taylor, or if you want to learn more about me and how I started my company. There's a few pages in the book about that. And yeah, if you want to hear more, you guys can follow me on Instagram, Rachel Feigelson. It'll probably be in the show notes, I'm assuming.
Yes, I will include it in the show notes.
Yeah. But thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, thanks for being on. I really appreciate it. There you have it. Thank you so much for listening to my conversation with the amazing Rachel Feigelson. All of the names and companies and brands and things that Rachel had mentioned throughout the show will be in the show notes below, as well as her social media and her website, so that you can keep up with her and her projects. I just want to send out a quick friendly reminder to sign up for my mailing list, as it's a great way to be notified when new episodes like this are released, as well as some music industry tips and tricks. If I could talk today, that would be great. There's also a Patreon link where you can work with me. There's different tiers and different pledges that I can provide to you, and you can even work with me. There's also a link to the guest requests form in the show notes as well. So if you or somebody you know would be a good guest for the show, please fill that out and or send it to them, and I will reach out so we can hopefully get you to be a guest on the show. I'm always looking for talented music and entertainment industry professionals, such as artist managers, lawyers, artists, songwriters, touring managers, event producers, you name it. Anything that has to do with the entertainment industry, I'm looking for. Lastly, if you could leave me a review, a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you listen to podcasts on, I would greatly appreciate it, as it greatly helps boost the show and help other listeners discover the show so they can enjoy this content as well. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support and your sharing and all that stuff with all of your friends and family. I'm overwhelmed by all of the support I've received through the show so far, and I can't thank you all enough. So we will see you next week on When Life Hands You Lemons.